Hello everyone, welcome to WTP, a podcast dedicated to all things anime from the perspectives of an advanced viewer, casual, and beginner. I am your host, Jake Campbell. So today we're going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Since Daniel still does not have his laptop and Malcolm is on a quick hiatus, I decided this would be a perfect time to talk to you about my favorite anime. I hesitated there to say anime because I know that there is a lot of division about whether or not Avatar: The Last Airbender is an anime. So if you're talking about from the American perspective, anything that is not originating from Japan typically is not considered an anime in the States. We have cartoons and a long history of cartoons, but we really try to distinguish anime based on its style and its origin. But it's interesting to note that in Japan, even if that show doesn't originate in Japan, it's still considered anime most of the time. So it is interesting to see from like my own nation's perspective, this would not be considered anime. It's more of a cartoon, and that's how it was marketed when it was displayed at Nickelodeon. But it is an anime in my eyes, so we're just going to go with that, and it is my favorite anime. So we'll go from there. So first of all, Avatar: The Last Airbender was a American animated television series created by Brian Konietzko. Boy, I'm going to screw this up. Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante Di Martino. Whew, mouthfuls. And this was a 3-season airing on Nickelodeon. So each of the series was released in a book chapter. So seasons 1, 2, and 3 in an American term, or books 1, 2, and 3, book 1 being water, book 2 being earth, and book 3 being fire. So just as a quick synopsis, what Avatar: The Last Airbender covers is essentially there are 4 nations in the world. One of them is water, earth, fire, and air. So these 4 nations lived in harmony, and everything was maintained in balance. All these elements are kept in check because we have a person named the Avatar. The Avatar is a master of all 4 of those elements, and basically what runs around almost like a superhero, Superman, Wonder Woman, something like that, where they're keeping the whole world in check. Well, we find out that the Avatar disappears, and once the Avatar has disappeared, we don't know where they've gone. The Fire Nation sees this as a time to exert their imperial goals on the world and takes over. They attack. There's this ongoing war. It's been going on for 100 years, I believe, quite a long time. And so we get thrown into this 100 years deep into this war with a discovery of the new Avatar named Aang, and kind of following along Aang's journey as he learns who he is, understands his past, and challenges the imperial rule of the Fire Nation. So kind of a long blurb there, but there's a lot of character building that goes on with Aang and his companions throughout the story. And I think, it warrants taking a little bit of time to explain that. So a couple things that I really like about this show is the world building. So the elements, every nation has an element, and a lot of their culture is reflected by that element. The air nomads are, very free, very flowing people. They resemble mostly Buddhist monks. They're very detached from the material possessions of the world. They live on high crest mountaintops and these temples, and are very, very peaceful and nonviolent in their actions. You have the Fire Nation, which are very militant. They're aggressive. They're proud, and very like forward moving, forward thinking. They are some of the only nation that has really, I guess, embraced the industrial revolution. A lot of the tech you could see is pre-industrial for most of the world, and the Fire Nation has steam engines, steamships, things like that. They're not afraid of industry and technology. So it's interesting to note kind of their militarism, their imperialism, and their kind of their forward thinking in industry. The Earth Nation is a very proud, stoic, strong, and steadfast nation. You can see this in a lot of their buildings and structures. Ba Sing Se, their capital, has incredibly high walls. Their bending is all about being very connected to the ground, being forceful, but they're very much on the defensive, where the Fire Nation is very aggressive. The Water Nation's also really interesting too. A lot of their martial arts were very fluid motions. They adopted a lot of the martial arts for the animation into these very fluid, flowing motions, almost like something like Tai Chi. It looked like, and you can see a lot of their culture. They are similar nomadic. They're more tribal. And they rely a lot on the element water around them to facilitate their life. So it's very interesting to see the martial arts and the elements. They all play together. Like each element has their own martial arts style to the bending. And then as far as the avatar, it's very interesting to see them as a combination of all of these elements. The theme of the avatar kind of goes into lots of what you considered Eastern philosophies: Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. The idea of a reincarnation is prevalent in the show. The avatar, when one dies, the avatar is then reborn into a new body. So each nation, and it rotates, each nation inherits an avatar, essentially. So water, fire, earth, air, it's a cycle. So the previous avatar, I believe, was from the Fire Nation, and then the most current one and the main character, Aang, is the Air Nation avatar. So you get to see this cycle, and it's very cool that in the show they have flashbacks to all of these previous incarnations of the avatar. So Aang gets advice from Master Roku, the previous avatar, and avatars all the way, through the millennia, really. So it's a cool theme. The idea of reincarnation is pretty heavy in there, and in cycle and balance. That's all kind of homages to that philosophies. So the other things that I really like about the show are the themes. Casualties of war is a big one. I'm trying to avoid too many spoilers in case people want to go back and watch the show or haven't seen it. It's fairly popular, so I'm going to go light on the spoilers, maybe allude to things, but I'll try to keep it as general as possible so people who haven't seen it can enjoy this. So casualties of war, this is discussed. Our main characters have been part of these casualties of war. People have lost mothers, fathers. They play a huge role in their development. And I like that in the show, it's not just the people that you've lost, it's also the people you've lost into war. Some of the characters have lost family members, and obviously this has a large impact on them. And I wouldn't say it's tropey. It's very well done about the responsibilities and the duties that are inherited because these kids don't have family or parents to drive forward their progress and their growth. So it kind of forces them to take on a more adult role at a young age, and it's a very beautiful way that they describe that. Like one of the characters, Sokka, his dad is off fighting in the war, and he is, along with his sister, are in charge of, taking care of the tribe. And you see the first episode, Sokka trying to defend this tribe. And, it's a very juvenile effort. He's obviously not strong enough to fight off soldiers. but you see him, try nonetheless. And I like that they didn't, ham-fist it in the way that, he was successful on the first go, or that, he has clear motives. And it was really to show like, hey, your passion's, good. I'm glad that you're wanting to defend your tribe, but you have to be smart about how you do that. Strength is not just brute force. I really love that Katara and him learn this lesson over the series. Something else that we could talk about casualties because of war is the breakdown of a family unit. The antagonist early on in the show, we have Prince Zuko. He is what I would consider a casualty of war. He's a prince of the Fire Nation. He has been outcast by his father for disobeying orders and arguing with a general, and he is on a path of redemption to capture the Avatar and reclaim his birthright and be seen as favorable in his father's eyes. So he is on this hunt, and really, it's a story of how he has lost so much because of the war, even though you would say he's a prince of the winning faction in this conflict. He really has lost almost everything. So it's very interesting to watch his progress in the story and his growth. And it's interesting to note that he actually was almost seen as a side character when they were first spinning the show and were wanting to develop it. And turns out he is one of my favorite characters in the entire story based on where his story goes. Another thing and theme that we can talk about is genocide. It's a very heavy topic, and they hit it very early in Avatar, is the consequence of imperialism and pushing into territories and regions and fighting off people who are not able to defend themselves, and it becomes a genocide. It's just beautifully done and really shows the futility of war and the cost that it causes for people who have really no involvement in the war itself. It's really quite sad, the episodes, and it hits very early. The next one obviously is imperialism. The Fire Nation is a great representation of this. Their war and their might and influence over the other tribes and nations is seen, from the very first episode when they invade the Southern Water Tribe. So it's very interesting to note that this nation has so much brutality shown early on in the show, and it's really cool to then see as the show progresses. You get to see the softer sides of the Fire Nation. You get to see the citizens of the Fire Nation that really don't like the war as well. And it's interesting how Nickelodeon and the show portrayed all of this very early on. I mean, the show started in 2005. We're in the middle of the Iraq War, and talking about an imperialistic move, and talking about being seen as a foreign invader by the people in some of those nations, and maybe seen as liberators. It's a very interesting parallel that Nickelodeon and Avatar does. And imperialism's not a new move. I mean, we've seen this in Star Wars, we've seen this in many other series. It's interesting when a show not only shows the bad sides of imperialism, but also shows the good of their people, and maybe the well-intentions of some of the Fire Nation, and the cost and pain that's caused as well. So they don't make a black and white comparison of the Fire Nation. There are good people within the Fire Nation, namely Uncle Iroh, which is Zuko's mentor. He is by far probably the best shining example of the good that is found in the Fire Nation. Patient, empathetic of other people, understanding of their culture. So I really like that the show didn't choose to go for good guy and bad guy, but really gray areas and more complex themes. Another one being gender discrimination. We see early on in the show roles of women in these societies, and Katara being one of the main characters who breaks from these roles and really takes on a role of leadership. Also a character that shows up later, Toph Beifong, another one who breaks her roles, not only of her gender, but of her class and what she's expected to be, and joining Team Avatar. Definition of family is another really interesting theme. There are people that become family that have no blood bonds. There are people who are, part of a royal family and have completely disintegrated their bonds between each other for good reason. So I really love that the show is talks about, what makes family, and really it's the love, compassion, and support that people provide for each other, and not the familial bonds in the traditional sense. Revenge, forgiveness, redemption, those are all really covered heavily here, and we won't get into each one of these, but redemption by far, I won't tell you which character, but there is a huge redemption arc for this person, and it's probably one of my favorite character arcs overall ever written outside of anime. I think it is just absolutely wonderful the way that the story's told. So I've never gotten bored with the show. There's 61 episodes. It's broken up into these 3 chapters, cleanly kind of laid out into each of the nations that is really focused in for Avatar. The world building also of these mythical lore places like the library, the spirit world, kind of these mythological events like Day of the Black Sun. It's just really cool to see all of the world building and the imagination that's laid out into the show. And I really just love the overall story, how complex the characters are. I mean, there's plenty of scenes that have clearly just made me cry. I mean, it's beautifully written. The dialogue's beautiful, and I think it's probably one of my favorite shows of all time as well. Again, outside of animation or cartoons, this is just a fantastic show. Themes, plot, drama, just incredible. And the animated sequences are very entertaining too. So a little fun fact laid in here, Fire Lord Ozai, this is the main antagonist of the story, is actually voiced by Mark Hamill. And I did not know that until researching this episode. So I thought that was quite interesting. But to top it off, I think we can't get away without talking about how terrible the Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was. It was, of course, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, kind of a full re-envisioning of the story, but luckily did not make it past the first movie. There was a lot of themes and morals that were completely left on the wayside. Events that were changed for really no apparent reason, changing of characters' names, even though they're clearly established in the show. It was a box office flop, and you do not need to waste your time on it. This review is completely about the show alone. Just to run through some of my favorite episodes for people who have watched the show. Again, we won't talk about the spoilers within them, but when you hear the episode names, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, of probably what makes me really enjoy each of these episodes. So in season 1, I think some of the best storytelling is found in episodes 11 and 12. Episodes 12 and 13. So the storm, this is when Aang is riding Appa, and there's a flashback of his origin story, and you get to really learn about his character, what he is running from, and what he knows he has to become. This is kind of like the first real character moment for Aang, and laying out the plot for really the rest of the show. The Blue Spirit, I love this because it's really a great division of gray, like black and white characters. The character you think is bad and the character you think is good. Before this moment, you might be very conflicted about, okay, I know this character is bad and I know this character is good. The Blue Spirit really throws that all all away, really. It's a fantastic, tightly written sequence, escape sequence. I love it. It's like a good Prison Break show. And then I think for sure in season 2, moving along, Zuko alone. This is a great character study into Zuko, kind of the trials that he's facing and some decisions that he has to make. The library is also just a beautiful sequence shot out in this desert location, and you get to see kind of this mythological lore stacked world. I just think is quite incredible. Tales of Ba Sing Se, of course, one of my favorite episodes for character. You get to glimpse into Uncle Iroh, understanding his past and maybe some pain that he's holding on to. The Crossroads of Destiny, the season ender for season 2, is by far one of my favorite episodes. This is paired with the previous episode of The Guru, where Aang is learning about limitations that could hold him back from the Avatar state. So the idea of what's binding him to this world and what does he have to let go of to become who he was born to be. And the Crossroads of Destiny is the summary of that lesson that he's learned. Moving on into season 3, I think Sokka's Master is by far one of my favorite side episodes. That is a beautifully written story, and really Sokka as a character deserved his own episode, and he gets it here. It's very cool. I just love the kind of the character progression there. The Day of the Black Sun part 1 and 2 is incredible. Really just kind of a cool sequence and a cool idea laid out of how elements interact with the world around them, and maybe large events that can affect entire nations. It's very just a cool lore building episode. The Southern Raiders, probably one of the best stories about revenge and forgiveness. I think it's probably one of my favorite episodes as well in season 3, really covering all of that. And then of course the series finale of Sozin's Comet is just breathtaking. Like some of the animation and I guess the power creep has been very consistent up through this time. So it's very cool to see that power progress, and probably one of my favorite fighting sequences, just beautifully shot. Of course, the Agni Kai that's at the end there, just incredible. So anyways, I've been talking for quite a while about this show, and there's really not much more to say other than if you haven't seen this, you absolutely should hunt this down. Believe this is available on Amazon Prime. There might be availabilities on Hulu, I'm not sure, but really, if you're looking for a solid action show that has a lot of heart, a lot of character development, it really has all of the qualities that I look for in an anime, which is well-written story, engaging plot, realistic characters, beautiful themes, and of course, just an incredible story overall. How it wraps up, how it's told. It's just breathtaking. So anyways, yeah, we're wrapping up at about 24 minutes here. So I figured that's a good place to call it. But if we're talking about this show and what I rate it, I don't know if Malcolm had done that on the previous episode, but I really loved the themes, and I basically ran through all about what I liked here. What did I dislike? Honestly, that there wasn't as much of it. We only got 3 seasons, but that's what makes it a tight story, and I think that's great. I always recommend this show to people, even if you don't like anime. I just recommend it. It's a great show. I will always watch this again. I hope to, watch this with my friends, my family, maybe my kids in the future. I think it's just a fantastic show overall, and it's going to age well. I give it like a 9 and 9.5 out of 10. I think there's a couple episodes that drop a little bit short, but overall for 61 eps, like it's breathtaking. So nothing's ever perfect, but 9.5 is what I would give the show. It's just clean and over the top great. And I think that about wraps up this episode. We'd like to thank Joachim Karud for the use of his music in our podcast. The intro is Dreams, and the outro is Lowrider. Links to his contact info will be in our show notes. If you enjoyed listening to us, please make sure to rate us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Ratings are super helpful for us, so feel free to rate and comment on all of those platforms to raise our visibility. It really does help us. Check out our website, weebthepeople.com, all one word. Make sure to also follow our Twitter handle at weeb_the_people for future updates. If you have any questions, either DM us on Twitter or email us, preferably DM on Twitter. We check that much more often, but you can also email us at weebthepeoplepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jake, and this has been Weeb the People. Have a great evening.